So with the launch of the Steam Deck imminent, and with AMD starting the rollout of their Ryzen 6000 series on mobile, people are getting very excited to see what these new iGPUs are really going to perform like, and early numbers are starting to look very, very nice. But I want to temper your guys' expectations because there is some glaring issues in the upcoming generation. Specifically, I'm talking in the lower end of the product stack. So with the 5000 series, what AMD did was they filled out the bottom end of the stack with previous generation products. So what was essentially the 4600U just ended up becoming the 5500U, and what was the 4800U just became the 5700U. It was really only the 5600U and the 5800U that were actually next gen products. And continuing on that tradition, what AMD is now doing is they're filling out the bottom and the end of the stack with what is essentially just a refresh of the 5600U and the 5800U. So that means no RDNA 2 graphics, and we are not getting the improved 6nm cores. And while the CPU improvements are noticeable, they are not as substantial as those GPU improvements. So there is going to be a huge difference between the bottom end of the stack and the top end, because now we're going to have both Vega and RDNA 2 around at the same time in brand new CPUs, which means that unfortunately the replacement for the 5500U is actually going to be pretty much identical to it. We're not seeing much of an improvement in anything besides just cache sizes. It's still the same Radeon 7 GPU with Vega cores, and that is going to be different than the previous generation, because what AMD did do was segment like this, but the difference between the iGPU of the 5500U and the 5600U is actually not that different, because at the end of the day it's still the same Vega GPU. This time around there is going to be a generational difference that I think is going to push these OEMs to raise their prices, because now there is a big differentiator between the two. Because I mean, if you look at the price points of the 5600U, the cheapest laptop you can get right now with it on Amazon is over $700. We are at the end of that product life cycle, and it is still above that price point. So that lets you know that this upcoming generation is probably going to be very expensive, especially because you don't get RDNA 2 until you get to the 6600U. And the very best iGPUs are only going to be available in CPUs that are realistically only going to be paired with dedicated graphics, which means that we're going to have the top end iGPUs on the market just being wasted on computers that don't even need those iGPUs. So really what all of this ends up meaning is that if you are a budget shopper, you know, someone that just looks at the lower end of the market, not much is really changing for you. You're pretty much still stuck with a at best Vega experience. And Intel really is not going to be your savior in this, because already they have confirmed that with Alder Lake's upcoming U series or replacement series for the Tiger Lake generation, we're pretty much sticking to the exact same core arrangement. So what will eventually be the replacement of the 1135 G7 is still going to have 80 execution units on the iGPU. So there is going to be no uplift in GPU performance. So while things are looking great on the mid and high end segment of the market, the low end really is actually having a terrible year. We are not seeing any improvements whatsoever. And that's absolutely devastating in a market where even getting mid-range hardware is just so grossly expensive. I mean, at this point, really one of the cheapest ways to get an RDNA 2 system is just going to be to buy a Steam Deck, because I expect laptops to ship with these RDNA 2 graphics to be very, very expensive, because they do have a very powerful and very attractive product here, and I think that they know this. Because if Intel is not going to compete in iGPU, then they have pretty much just handed over this generation to AMD. Because Nvidia has already been struggling in this segment where their low-end GPUs just really don't end up on many systems. You don't really see as many systems with the MX450 and the upcoming 550. And the reason for that is usually because of the fact that these OEMs just don't want to put a dedicated chip in there. At the end of the day, no matter how low power it is, it's still going to use up more power than an iGPU, and it's going to require more cooling. And as we all know, these companies want to cheap out as much as possible. So if they can just focus in on one area to cool, they have to use less materials, and it's just less effort for them overall. So we end up in a situation where going with AMD and just getting that really powerful iGPU with the CPU that is going to be more powerful than almost anything else you can get, it's going to be very, very attractive for OEMs. What I'm really curious to see is how many laptops are actually even going to ship with those top end chips with no dedicated graphics, because I imagine most systems are just going to have a dedicated graphics card, and I would hate to see those really powerful iGPUs kind of just go to waste. But yeah, this is kind of just a different format of a video compared to what I normally make. I just felt like talking about this because the year does look kind of rough if you're into the low end of the market. But anyways, let me know what you think. I will see you guys next time.